Welcome back to our final session of our general session for the Mini Land Grant virtual conference this year, hosted here at the University of Missouri. Our final general session is going to be entitled Community Learning Through Data Discovery, and we're going to be led by Dr. Shibu Jose. Dr. Jose came to the University of Missouri from the University of Florida, where he spent 12 years. He's been at the University of Missouri for a total of 12 years now as well, and since 2019 he's been serving as the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources and the Director of the Missouri Agricultural Experiment Stations. Dr. Jose?
All right. Well, thank you, HC. It's my pleasure to introduce two distinguished scholars and national leaders as speakers for this final session of day one of the 2021 Mini Land Grant Conference. Dr. Sallie Ann Keller is an endowed distinguished professor in biocomplexity and director of the Social and Decision Analytics Division within the Biocomplexity Institute at the University of Virginia, and she is also a professor of public health sciences. Her areas of expertise are social and decision informatics, statistical underpinnings of data sciences, and data access and confidentiality. Dr. Keller is a leading voice in creating the science of all data and advancing this research across disciplines to benefit society. Some of her prior positions include Vice President and Provost at the University of Waterloo, Dean of Engineering at Rice University, Head of the Statistical Sciences Group at the Los Alamos National Lab, and Statistics Program Director at the National Science Foundation. Dr. Keller is an elected member of the National Academy of Engineering. She has served as a member of the National Academy of Sciences, Board of Mathematical Sciences and their Applications, the Committee on National Statistics, and has chaired the Committee on Applied and Theoretical Statistics. She is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, elected member of the International Statistics Institute, and fellow and past president of the American Statistical Association. Dr. Cathie Woteki is a distinguished professor, also with the Biocomplexity Institute at the University of Virginia. Dr. Woteki is a well-respected scholar and a leader in science policy. She is known nationally and internationally for her wealth of knowledge of agriculture, food, nutrition, and health from her years of leadership in government, industry, and academia. She also is currently a professor of food science and human nutrition at Iowa State University, where she served as Dean of the College of Agriculture from 2002 to 2005. I'm sure many of you remember Dr. Woteki as the Undersecretary for USDA Research, Education, and Economics mission area, as well as the department's chief scientist from 2010 to 2016. Her responsibilities included oversight of the 4 agencies that comprise REE: the ARS, NIFA, ERS, and NAS. She has held other prestigious positions, including Deputy Associate Director for Science in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy from 94 to 96. Dr. Woteki was Director of the Food and Nutrition Board of the Institute of Medicine at the National Academy of Sciences from 1990 to 1993. She is the recipient of many awards and honors for her contributions to science and society, and was inducted into the National Institute of Food and Agriculture Hall of Fame in 2017. Please join me in welcoming these two distinguished scholars as speakers for our session.
Well, thank you very much. This is Sallie. I will start off today. I really would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to this mini conference, and we're very excited to share with you today a vision that we have had for a number of years that we feel now is gaining some significant traction. And what we would really like to accomplish in this session is to hear from you, your thoughts about what we have to say, and your ideas about how we try to move this framework and vision forward. I'm going to figure out how to make this flip. Okay, here we go. So there's a team that has been working together now for several years, and it crosses multiple universities in multiple states. It includes Stephanie Shipp, who's also with us this afternoon. She's actually the deputy in my research division, but also a distinguished economist and policy analyst with extensive experience across the federal statistical system before leaving her positions there to be a senior researcher at the Science and Technology Policy Institute, which is the research arm for OSTP, and then joined me in developing this research group and has been a very significant partner in driving forward the community learning through data-driven discovery vision. We also have a colleague, Cass Dorius at Iowa State, who's been very involved in bringing Iowa on board. Lindsay Shirley, who most recently was at Oregon State University, and Oregon was one of our partner states in all of this. And the exciting fact that she's now moved to Colorado State means that hopefully Colorado will come on as a partner. And then one of our very first partners at Virginia Tech, which is Mike Lambert, who's an associate director within the cooperative extension system at Virginia Tech. So that's our core team. Cathie Woteki as well has been with us in this conversation almost since the start, as soon as, well, actually while she was still at USDA, I recall going there to talk to her about this. And she now leads a national advisory committee that is helping to sort of guide us on this journey that we have. So let's sort of start by talking about what is it that we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is to help re-examine how we connect with communities. And who is we here? We are all of you at this conference, as well as many of us who work with you in a variety of capacities. And in particular, the we is very much the cooperative extension system. And then in addition to the typical researchers that work with the system, we want to add data scientists into that mix. And what we would like to do is to work together with communities to support equitable recovery and growth and help to create visibility and recognition of what the cooperative extension system can do as a provider of evidence-based education, research, and services. Evidence-based here for us very much means data-driven, quantitative insights. We feel that there's a great opportunity to support the professional success of extension leadership and of all of the professionals. There's an opportunity to expand the federal and non-federal resources available to extension, and at the end of our presentation, hopefully that's what we'll be discussing. And then finally, we feel that this framework that we will present to you has the opportunity to help the cooperative extension system rapidly address priorities and national issues that can move forward through collective action, and collective action again that involves this democratization of data into our communities, into the communities that we serve. So this journey that we've been on together with cooperative extension, and the we in this case are the data scientists and researchers that are now partnered up working with our colleagues in cooperative extension, is to partner with local community stakeholders to take a deep data-driven approach to understanding and helping to address the issues within the communities. I like to think about this as mobilizing the last data mile of really getting data insights into the hands of the communities that they serve, into the hands of the stakeholders. So just like we think about that last data mile of broadband, this is the last data mile for really making use of data and data insights in all communities, big and small. We have a guiding process, which we call community learning through data-driven discovery. This process we have developed hand in hand with cooperative extension professionals through our work together with communities. It goes well beyond a traditional collective impact process because it takes on the whole cycle from the identification of the issues, placing those issues in a data context, bringing data together and data insights to help understand that, drawing in subject matter experts who can help put the community context around these issues, and then helping to provide evidence for actions, evaluating those actions, redirecting resources, and it's a continuous learning cycle. The outer wheel of this picture you can think of as the interaction and communication across all of the different stakeholders. The middle wheel is where this data-driven learning process happens. So that's sort of a new feature to some of the activities that cooperative extension professionals might do in their typical program planning. The frontier between those two wheels is massive amounts of communication among all stakeholders and players. And then the inner circle is really extremely important because that is the rigorous research framework to guide the data science process. So we're trying to infuse data science into this work, but not in an ad hoc way, in a rigorous, defendable, reproducible way, so that we can really help support and partner with cooperative extension system and cooperative extension professionals, the community stakeholders that they serve, and the other research partners across our campuses. So what have we done? So we've actually had good fortune to have some funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, coupled with the USDA NIFA program. And what we were asked to do was to test whether the cooperative extension network could be an effective dissemination network for community-driven data science-based learning, particularly around issues of economic mobility, very broadly defined. So the team that I shared with you earlier was formed, and we decided that we would test this concept across 3 states, and that's what we've done across Virginia, Iowa, and Oregon. So this included getting cooperative extension to initiate community learning through data-driven discovery projects, problems, and issues with their community stakeholders, assembling teams that were then able to do a data science reach back to our universities so that we could support the data discovery, building data insights around access to healthcare, food insecurities, workforce development and economic growth, just a whole range of issues. And in fact, I think Stephanie will put in the chat a link to the website where you could actually see a lot of these case studies as well as see the pilot project itself. In addition, we started to create a data commons that was now gathering data across our 3 states, across all of the different issues that we were looking at, that would now be able to support other communities as they start to address some of the similar issues. And then finally, it was critical to roll out some training for the cooperative extension professionals that we were working with so that we could begin to speak the same language and more quickly accelerate the work that we're doing. And again, I think Stephanie will put a link to some of the training. The training is available right now through webinar recordings and soon to be rolled out on self-paced learning modules. Well, the pilot was wildly successful. It ran for about 18 months. And so that brings us to the next phase of our thinking about all this. We have done some work to get out into the communities across our states and with some of our other cooperative extension professionals and academic researchers in other states, and ask the question, if you had access to data, if you had access to data science expertise and training, how might you use it? To just sort of test, is this actually a useful framework and process to try to encourage the system to take on across the country, not just in a pilot capacity? Well, the answers came back quite strongly. That first of all, it would help measure capacity for new community development projects, that would be extremely useful, looking at the community as a whole. It could really help extension and the communities work together to decide how to focus their time and energy strengthening downtown and Main Street. And in fact, during this COVID time, because this pilot was running, the pilot started before COVID and ran right through the whole COVID time, we were able to very quickly mount some data insights, data collection, build some quick data tools and dashboards that the communities were able to use to help support their understanding of remote access, their understanding of how to reach their constituencies in this new mode, their understanding of the complexities of the high school students that were trying to, that had left high school before their counselors had a chance to help them understand how to find financial aid as they try to enter college. This is an activity that Cooperative Extension actually gets quite engaged in. So all of this data work that we did and some of the tools that we built, and some of these exemplars are on the case studies site, really helped our Cooperative Extension colleagues understand the lay of the land in the time of a evolving crisis and how to reach their communities. So that was just sort of one example where this kind of partnership, where we can move quickly and agilely together, could be really helpful. Clearly, this access to data and data science expertise and training can really help understand underserved populations on a variety of topics and how they're changing over time. And one of the really big and important features is that it can help the communities apply for grants, get legislative support, and measure impact, which is a very difficult thing for them to do at the level of their local communities. So we're pretty convinced that this can be a powerful and successful framework and process and partnership. So what we would like to do, what are our next steps, is that we would really like to help develop an engaged ecosystem, and I'm talking about a national ecosystem, one that can advance community learning through data-driven discovery across the country, one that can infuse data science and data insights across the country from the most urban to the most rural areas. We believe that in this ecosystem, that the cooperative extension system is and should be the catalyst at the center. This is a network, as you all know, is incredibly well established, is all across the country in all of our communities, is tightly linked to our public and land-grant universities, has the Ag Experiment Station infrastructure and network that is in the mix as well. So it's a really well-established network that has a long history of doing similar things to help support economic growth, help support quality of life, help support the dissemination of research and learning to our communities. So we believe that working together, we can advance this community learning through data-driven discovery, know-how, and partnering. We feel that it's important that we establish data science reach back to our universities that are interested in engaging in community-based research at this level, that we can help enhance the opportunities of translating data to action and help our communities spiral up. To help this process and to help these engaged stakeholders, we think it's important that we start to think about curated data commons. Maybe it's one massive national data commons, maybe it's data commons within each state, but we should really think about how we more strategically build out data assets that are useful and are used by the cooperative extension system, by their stakeholders and communities, by the researchers at our institutions. We think that this will really help strengthen and disseminate things like economic mobility research, and it will really help the adoption of the community learning and this continuous learning process with our communities. We think that working together, we can build a new workforce of the future, because as soon as we start talking about bringing data science into the mix and trying to use the cooperative extension system to disseminate data science and data insights across the country, we're now training people with skill sets to go a lot of other places as well. And that's not uncommon to cooperative extension. Cooperative extension professionals in each of their fields could be doing other things, but they choose to be in this system. So we want to build that workforce of the future together that will choose to be working with our communities in this way and working with us. And so you can kind of think of this as merging data science and cultural competencies that the system has been rolling out. How do we want to do this? Well, in part, we feel that it's time to really ignite this movement of democratization of data across the United States and the American territories. We think there are significant implications for the Farm Bill, and this is what we'd like to hear from you about, that could help bring new resources and bring new competencies into the system. There's clearly a role for the community leadership, a bigger role perhaps for that community leadership and local government than we have seen in the past. There's a role for universities, particularly with this new data science reach back, to be part of the system. And we think that there's a role for the agricultural experiment stations, and would like to hear your ideas on that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cathie Woteki to help lead us in discussion.
Great. Well, thank you, Sallie. You've done a great job in describing this vision. And what I'd like to do at this point is to, as Sallie said, open it up for some discussion. I think it's good that we stay on this slide, because that would provide a really, really good context for the discussion. So before we get into that, let me say, put your questions into the chat, and we'll take them as they come in. And while you're composing some of those questions, let me just make a couple of remarks to kind of recap some of the things that Sallie said, and set us up for talking about what the implications of this vision are. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking Robin Shepherd for recommending that we be added on to the program today. So thank you, Robin. And also to thank Dr. Shibu Jose for working with us to get the session into reality. So thank you, Dr. Jose. As Sallie indicated, we've been pilot testing this concept now for the last couple of years in 3 different states, and really demonstrated that it works. And there's also a hunger, a desire on the part of many communities to access their own data, to get access to information from other sources that can help them make better decisions. And through the pilot test, if you've had an opportunity while Sallie was talking to kind of look at the website, you can also see that not only economic mobility, but there were also a wide number of projects that were conducted under this pilot test that got into areas of health, transportation, natural resources. So again, demonstrating that communities have a wide variety of different kinds of problems that they're dealing with, and this model of democratizing data and facilitating access to data really has been helpful to communities. So our feeling, as Sallie said, is we're kind of poised to expand. We've been laying the groundwork with some other states to see if they're interested, ready to begin working with us to implement this approach, and probably already building on work and approaches that they have underway as well using data. But the big issue is we need resource to be able to really fuel that virtual cycle that Sallie was talking about that we'd like to see. So we thought with the time we have today, we could talk about your view of the role for agricultural experiment stations, your view of the role for universities, because this goes beyond at some universities, the traditional roles and resources available. And at others universities, they already have a university-wide approach towards cooperative extension. But we also would like your views about implications for the Farm Bill, because we see that a new authorization would perhaps bring those assets that are needed to continue building out this approach for democratizing data using the resources of public universities, and particularly the land-grant universities. So let's go to the chat.
So I can repeat that question for you, but also I will add a comment that I have. I also hope that you can address that comment from one of the speakers this morning. So let me restate the question first. The question was, what kind of data are we talking about? I'm sure you can explain that, but we had a speaker this morning and he made a comment that I thought it was relevant, and I would just bring that up. He said, what we need is not more data, but more data of the right kind. So I hope you can address the question as well as my comment.
Great. Well, Sallie, you want to tackle that?
Sure. Let me start out, and then you may want to add to it, Cathie. So in terms of what kind of data are we talking about, and the idea that we don't need more data. So what are the process, the community learning through data-driven discovery process, part of that process is a data discovery step. And it's a data discovery step and process that we work hand in hand with our cooperative extension colleagues and the community stakeholders, where we try to identify existing data related to the issue at hand. Now, clearly, the assets of the American Community Survey and of the Census Bureau and of USDA, Economic Research Services, and other agencies routinely, cooperative extension and others make use of those data. But there are other data assets as well that we can start to bring to bear from CDC, from USGS, and very specifically from the community itself, data that the community itself may be collecting through some of its administrative records and other sorts of things. So we don't advocate that you go out and do new data collection right off the bat. What we advocate is that you frame your question in a data context. And if this question is around the attractability of the workforce to a particular area, there's a lot of different pieces of data that you can now start to frame into that problem. And then this is where the data science comes in, is that we're really good at finding these data sources and bringing them into a form and ensuring that they have good quality and understanding the ethics and the biases associated with those data as we start to bring them to bear on the problem. And then once you've exhausted everything you might learn from data that you can find through all different sources, that might lead you to some new data collection. But in most of the work that we've been doing, we've been able to really harness all of this existing data, scraping things when we can off of the web, place-based data is really important, and using those pieces of information. So somebody put a link up here to the All Things Missouri site. That's a great example of being able to harness together a lot of different data sources and making those available to then be used in a lot of different ways. So hopefully that made some sense.
Right, very, very
Yeah,
good. Cathie, anything to
and-
add?
Yeah, I would like to add, one of the aspects of this approach also is the visualization of the data for the client in the community, you know, whether it's a city manager or a program director or the head of Parks and Recreation, you know, whoever that client is that has brought you a problem. One thing that has been so helpful to them has been the visual display of the data, because if they can visualize it, they can understand it much better. So that's been another great asset of this program, or all of the different ways we now have of providing visual displays of data.
Great. Well, I can see that the chat room is very live now, and we have multiple linkages as well as questions being asked. One of the points this morning from our keynote speaker, Dr. Wendy Winterstein, was about extreme collaboration. So there is a question about collaboration here. I think this is very specific, but I was glad to hear, you know, some of the partners you identified earlier, Sallie, when you were talking about the different partners and potential partners. So the specific question here is, what level of collaboration do you have with the rural development centers? Have you established any collaborations with them?
So that's go ahead, Cathie, do you want to take that?
Well, I was going to say, from the beginning, we viewed the rural development centers as being really key collaborators, and have been keeping them informed as the project has been going forward.
That's right. And we hope to work with them more as things continue to move forward, as we try to expand out to more states and get more states interested in this. We feel that they're a really important conduit to getting the message out, as well as bringing the partners in.
Mm-hmm.
Great, great. Well, here is an interesting question. So, what are some of the lessons learned when you talk to municipalities and small rural communities struggling with growth as well as shrinkage? Can you share some of the lessons learned?
Yeah,
that's an excellent question. I think that the biggest lesson learned is that it's critical to meet the communities where they are. You know, as researchers, you know, as data wonks and data scientists, you know, as cooperative extension professionals that have been out there a long time, it's really easy to want to bring your view in an overbearing way to bear on the community, but it's critical that you listen and that you meet the communities where they are. And they are all at different places in terms of what their problems are, and also what their experience with data and data insights are. And so you really have to try to meet them where they are, help them understand what the value is in bringing data together to bear, help them understand that their data, even if it's sitting in a file cabinet in hard copy, is valuable to the understanding of their community and to the services that they provide and how they're meeting their constituencies. So I would think that I would say that that's probably one of the biggest lessons learned. Cathie, you may have something to add.
Well, as we were talking, Sallie, I was thinking about Marshalltown in Iowa, which was one of the first projects that we undertook in Iowa. And the first meeting that we went to with the new mayor and a relatively new city manager, and the project they wanted to work on was the bus system. And they felt that it wasn't serving the needs of the community. but they really didn't know quite how to go about it. And with help from Iowa State University, and they were able to identify data that they had, as well as merging it with a lot of other data sets to get a very good picture of what the transportation needs were in Marshalltown, and what changes they needed to make to the bus system.
Well, that's a great example, Cathie. And one of the questions here, I think you touched on some of it, and also earlier, Sallie was talking about it, but I'm going to repeat that question. So if you missed something, if you want to expand on something, you do have that opportunity. So the data you need depends on the questions you want to ask. So how do you work with the communities to determine the necessary questions? I know you answered parts of it earlier, so do you want to add anything more to that?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, it recognizes the fact that each community has different questions, that they're not all the same. And even if it is the same question about, even if it is a question about transportation and public transportation, for example, the context around that will be different in every community. And so it's really important to help get the questions out. And then I think that the really big role that we play as a partner is that we're able to take those questions and put them in a data context. We're able to develop what we call data maps that are, cartoons almost, that help community partners sort of see the bits and pieces of their community and how it relates to those issues, that then helps us and guides us to where we may look for data and information.
Great.
And as part of the model that has been developed, it's not a one-time solicitation of the question. You work with the client, in an iterative way, and as more data are become available through the discovery process, and through digitizing information that the community may have, but it's relevant to the question, but has not been digitized yet. And as you're doing that, and doing the initial analyses, there are some insights that'll help to refocus the question. So the process is actually iterative.
And that's why we think of this as a continuous learning process. I like to think about the fact that some of the problems we're working this year, the communities themselves will be able to work next year, and we'll be able to partner and work on to the next set, the next problems. And another thing that we have found to be very valuable is when you work with a community and you work on a particular issue, say like the Marshalltown problem with the transportation and the public transportation system, there's aspects of that problem and data assets associated with that problem that actually exist in all communities. And so when we can, and this is where these data commons, the data commons concept comes in, when we can, we then like to take that sort of smaller lift and build out those data insights more broadly, not just for that one community. Because now we have figured out how to quickly work with the data, what needs to happen to it, what the different statistics are that we're going to develop, and to spread that out, in the case of the 3 states, to spread that out across the 3 states. So that's a place where I would ask the question, as we start to do that or think about that in more of a national model, what's the right infrastructure for that? Is that a place where the universities teaming together do something? Is that an opportunity for the rural regional development centers to play a key role? Is that an opportunity for the ag experiment stations to take on a new activity? So that's just something to think about.
Well, Sallie, that brings up a question. Although you have had a successful pilot project now, and you are talking about a national data bank or data commons, and so let's spend maybe a few minutes to talk about how do you scale this up? How do you go from, being a 3-state model to perhaps a national model?
Cathie, you want to start?
Well, first is making people aware, and we've been doing that through presentations like this and in publications. So certainly awareness is important. More, generally across the country. We have, in addition to the 3 core states, plans to try to incentivize at least 8 or 10 additional states to begin adopting this model. But the big issue is resource. And that's why we've been looking towards the Farm Bill, which is up, as you all know, for reauthorization in 2023, and work has already been started to consider what APLU's agenda would be for authorizations and reauthorizations in the Farm Bill. So we've been looking towards an opportunity in the Farm Bill to get additional authorization specifically for this type of democratization of data and assigning it to the land-grant universities. Clearly, they have, through cooperative extension, the infrastructure that can be brought to bear to implement this additional role, expansion of the already existing role. But we were, as I said, looking to the Farm Bill as a place to get that additional authorization and also authorization for additional funding. We don't view this as being something that is going to happen in the way that it should if it is not appropriately resourced. And I see that there's an additional question in the chat that I think is also relevant to this, and that's what are the specialist needs that land-grant universities should be thinking about? What other types of campus expertise will be needed? And certainly through the pilot test, we've identified what those types of expertise are for the kinds of projects that we've implemented in the pilot test. It goes in certainly to data science, and depending on how your campus has been implementing data science, those expertises can be in the statistics department, in computer science, maybe in mathematics. The kinds of questions that the communities want to address may need somebody from land use management or transportation or marketing. So, from different discipline areas in different colleges across the university. So it requires the ability to reach into multiple departments, multiple colleges to bring that expertise to bear. Sallie, do you want to add to that?
So what I would add to that is also to just bring up in the social sciences, demographers, demography, economics has been a traditional partner, ag economics in particular, with the extension system for a long time, but bringing in more of the social behavioral areas become important as well.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, let me expand on that last question about the specialist needs. You mentioned earlier that your pilot project happened pretty much during COVID-19. So, we have learned a number of lessons as a result of COVID. And so, what are some of the challenges that you have seen as a result of COVID in particular? And can you share some of your lessons learned from that perspective with the audience? And also you were talking about, access to healthcare in particular. as an impact of the data-driven, or community learning through data discovery. So I would like to hear a little bit about, the specific challenges and perhaps even the opportunities that you noticed as a result of COVID-19.
So there's kind of two sides to that, two sides to my answer here. So first of all, we were really nervous when all of a sudden COVID hit, and our plans on how we were going to roll this pilot out, which was going to be a lot of face-to-face, traveling to remote parts of our state, bringing groups of students into our campuses to be part of these teams during the summertime. And we had to flip to a complete virtual and remote set of activities. So actually, on the one hand, in terms of reaching our cooperative extension colleagues and reaching some of the community stakeholders, it was probably easier than we had anticipated, because now people, they had more time. They were very busy, but they just had a different kind of time. So we felt that being able to roll out some training, being able to have that connection and build that quick connectivity with our colleagues actually ended up to be easier. And I think it's a modality that we can continue to leverage as we go forward, now that we've gotten used to this, more Zoom environment and that sort of thing. Even with our student teams, we flipped remote to a remote program almost overnight and had over 60 students and 30 faculty across the 3 states working together incredibly effectively. And they're doing it again this summer. So even that turned out to be a pretty seamless and unexpected plus in what had happened. I guess this is both a plus and a minus. On the COVID side and impact on communities, it did turn out to be the case that several of the projects that we took on had to do with health, mental health, access to health care, those sorts of problems. And what happened in Virginia in particular, actually and in Iowa as well, is that a couple of these community learning projects that got initiated caught the attention of our state health departments. And what we've been able to do in the time since, partly with some partnership with the Extension Foundation, has been to actually take what we did with, say, one county and actually now build out some data assets for the entire state, work with the state health department, rural health department in particular, to help get this infused across the state. And we're hopeful to take the next step in Virginia that would tie us more closely with public health. In Iowa, on the mental health side, they've had huge success taking some of this initial work around access to mental health support and just the state of mental health in different areas in the state, and to roll that out across the state with the state health department and in partnership with public health. So those are just a couple of examples of what we saw happen.
Great. Well, we have one more question that is posted here that I'm going to read to you. And I know that you addressed some of it earlier, but the question is, what level of data are you thinking about? Township, census, parcel level data? Can you maybe elaborate just a little bit about the level of data?
All of the above.
Yes.
In fact, all of the above. And we have become quite facile with parcel level data, for example, through the use of data aggregators. Being able to characterize, for example, the entire housing and property stock in an area is incredibly valuable. At the same time, bringing in the environmental data around soil, water quality, air quality, and these sorts of things. Again, the census level data. And then localities have some of their own data. That wouldn't necessarily be data assets you'd spread to other communities, but being able to help pull their data in as well. So it's literally all of the above. No holds bar on what we're willing to pull in.
Okay. Well, when you were talking about collaborations and partners, I was about to ask this question, but I did not get a chance, but I'm going to ask it anyway now. So, do you see a role for non-land grant universities in a let me make sure I get this right. In a community learning through data discovery project.
Yeah.
I certainly hope so. Since I'm at the non-land grant university. I think we really have to partner with our public and land grant and even, private universities. The more we can get researchers interested in community-based research rather than a pet project that does research in the community, the more that we're going to work together to help these communities. And I think, I was, when we started this, and in fact, we were at Virginia Tech at the time. Our institute has recently moved to University of Virginia. Stephanie Ship, in fact, and myself were working with some local communities, trying very hard to find funding from foundations and others because we just felt that, wow, there was so much power here. And we were challenged all the time that you work with one community. What is your model to scale? And this is where this partnership with Cooperative Extension System was born. That the Cooperative Extension System is a catalyst, a network that's already out there. And if we partner with them, we can scale to the benefit of all.
Well, there is no question about that. Cooperative Extension is in 3,000 plus counties nationwide. So it is doable. Yeah. Well, so we are coming to the end of our time frame here, and I'm looking for any other questions. And I'm not seeing any other questions at this point, but I also want to acknowledge your colleague, Stephanie Ship. You mentioned earlier that she may have some comments. Do you know if she has any comments that she would like to make?
Stephanie, over to you.
So this has been great. I think that Sallie and Cathie really covered it well. Just when you see the excitement of working with communities, and Cathie gave some examples of Marshalltown and others, they just get so excited, which then of course feeds into our enthusiasm and passion about bringing CLD3 process to local areas as well. So I'll wrap up with that and turn it back to Sallie.
All right.
Thank you,
Dr.
Thank you all very much for listening.
And also, I'd like to ask if anyone has ideas they'd like to share with us on this scale up and on the potential for engagement with the agricultural experiment stations, the model of working university-wide, and implications for the Farm Bill. We'd very much like to hear your ideas and feedback. And if your state would like to learn more, we certainly would love to be able to provide you with information about how we've made this grand vision operational, and hope that we can spark some more states to adopt this model.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Cathie and Sallie. Any final comments before we wrap up?
No, just thank you very much for listening. And like Cathie said, we'd love to hear your ideas and also challenges that you think we have ahead of us. Those would be very useful.
Great. Well, this has been such a great session. And to borrow your own phrase, an engaged ecosystem, well, that's what it was. We got a lot of questions and comments and feedback, and so a great discussion. What a great vision. So I applaud you all for your great vision and successful pilot testing, and now look forward to seeing further steps and to see it as a national model one day. And I wish you, the leaders of this movement, the very best and all the success. And so with that, I have a couple of housekeeping announcements, and then I will wrap up the session. Well, there is at least one session following this for the research group, and those of you who are the directors, they have received the link for your meeting that will begin at 2:30. It looks like the recordings of today's sessions will be available as videos on demand on the Cvent hub. So the same hub that you've been using to access the conference, that's where you will have the recordings available for further viewings later on. Well, that will conclude the session, our final session for day 1. We will see you back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock for day 2, our final day of the 2021 Mini Land Grant Conference. Thanks everyone for joining us.